Well, thank you very much for being here, and above all, to Alfonso, who has taken time even to give me some time. I'm going to try to summarize 5 years of my life in more or less 40 minutes. Yesterday I did a test, and I was more than twice as long, so, well, I had to cut it down quite a bit. So, well, in any case, if I finally have enough time left, I will give you more examples and more things, and if you have no doubts, we can discuss them. Let's go on. We won't take much longer. My goal with this talk is that when we finish, why this technology is attracting the best developers, builders, investors, and is beginning to attract much more liquidity. But from my point of view, it still has a long way to go. It's still in its infancy. It is also attracting, and this is something that I think you are going to see with the talk, the most dangerous attackers. There are teams of 4 or 5 people, which is what happened to me when I set up a startup in decentralized finance, and the attack is, as you can imagine, every day. But well, in any case, the teams behind it, you're seeing attribution to Lazarus and other PDs. So I think my goal is for you to understand also why it's attracting the most dangerous attackers, and also why it's attracting the best of you in terms of the rewards. There are multi-million-dollar bounties. Manitou orders 5 times what you pay for a bounty, and well, my goal is for you to also understand why. I'm going to introduce myself first of all, and well, I'm going to try to see if this video I'm giving you works, and it doesn't have audio. So while I'm telling you about it, I'm going to see if I can get enough coverage. Well, as Alfonso said, my name is Raúl Riesco.
Well, let's say I have more
than 20 years of experience. And among other things, so I would like to point out that I was lucky enough to be national coach of hacking teams of young talent to 25 years, and we were European champions since 2017, and maybe many of you do not even know it. Many of these champions are now giving talks here, like me. I have also given some other talks at Rooted and other top-level congresses. I have also been a trainer for law enforcement, and especially in my work for more than 14 years in Insaib.
Well, I was also in Telefonica, and I have been in different multinationals. In addition,
I was also in Telefonica, and I have been in different multinationals. In addition, I have launched different institutional projects, such as 17, which you probably know, to help citizens, and I have also worked for the European Commission, and I have been an advisor. Another thing that I have also brought from here is that finally, in possibly the worst moment of my life, with children, a lot of work and so on, I decided to do my PhD, and the truth is that, well, in this case I am quite proud because it was what also introduced me to blockchain issues. But none of what I have told you so far would give me the authority to talk to you here today about blockchain, if it is not what I tell you from this moment on. In 2018, I started sharing knowledge doing write-ups, being the first to solve some challenges of security CTFs in blockchain smart contracts. And I started to be curious, and so much so that, I introduced it in my doctoral thesis. And on the other hand, I ended up setting up a startup in which we had about $30 million in deposits in decentralized finance, and we have recently closed, and I set it up with people of high level who had worked at Google, in Y Combinator, in OpenCP Link, and so on. And this is where I really learned about Mebdun loop attacks, exploit attacks in fuse pools, things that will sound like Greek to you, and that's what I think will really give me the authority to talk to you here today. And finally, I've launched a personal project to help a lot more people do onboarding, in this case in blockchain, in blockchain security, which I've called Mandalorian Security. Before I start, I wanted to ask you a question. Who of you have already made a transaction in blockchain?
Okay. And how many of you
Okay.
have done transactions
And how many of you have done
DeFi
transactions on DeFi protocols?
Okay. So I see that there's already more or less
Okay,
a
so I
level
see that there is already more or less a level because it will help me to focus the talk a little bit. There are also people who haven't done those transactions, so I'm going to make a little introduction. I'm going to try to go fast. Web3, the difference it has from Web 1 and Web 2 is not that it is different, it incorporates it, but also at this point, what is different for me, in addition to being centralized and user-centric, is that we are going to be digital owners, digital asset owners. In this sense, a transaction, for those of you who already know it, well, for those of you who do not know it, we use cryptography, public-private key. We have a private key. We sign a transaction with the public key to whoever we send it to, and there we exchange value by sending assets. In this case, here we send an amount of a currency, in this case Ether, but we have an optional data field, and this is what we are going to use to interact with all the smart contracts. At the end, we send a transaction, and there is a network that is incentivized in a resilient way. It is resilient because
so that nodes can be executed now. After the merge, by any user does not need a wild computation capability.
It does not need a wild computational
I'm talking in this case about all blockchains that use proof of state, and it is incentivized to kick out and expel malicious nodes. Also, it uses hashes to create trees. You know, now hashing is a one-way operation.
You know, when you make a hash,
and when you make a hash, whatever you modify, the hash changes completely.
So, if you make hashes of all the transactions that make up a tree, you make the hash of these, the hash of the combination of the two, the hash of the combination of all this, so that you have at the end a hash that is called the Merkle proof, so that it is immutable. Anything that you modify of any of those transactions would cause that whole hash to be modified. What are smart contracts? At the end of the day, smart contracts is source code, which is usually written in Solidity or other more sophisticated languages like Viper, and it's something as simple as code and a storage of variables in a state. This is compiled. It's code that you compile and you throw it on the blockchain, and it runs. It's already available there on the blockchain. It's available on all those nodes
and all those blocks. And what we have are the facility to be able to do read and write operations, free read and write, because you're going to take up computational capacity, and at the same time, you're going to take up space that's going to be there forever. Update a variable that might be your account balance or whatever. Well, you have to pay a gas, okay? That is the price you have to pay, but you do not have to create any DPC, nor do you have to create any infrastructure of your own, because we share the network. Well, so when there is a smart contract that is deployed, we know what its address is. We again have our private key and our public key. And what we do is interact with the source code of this smart contract. How? Well, by using that data field that I was telling you about. That data field has a characteristic, and it is that the first 4 bytes are going to be the hash of the name of the function that we are going to call. You know that the hash is 32 bytes, but we are going to keep only the first 4 bytes. That is going to be the name of the function, and then the call data that is going to be added will be, depending on the function that we are going to call, the parameters that we are going to pass to it. For example, if we have a smart contract that is going to allow to make deposits in the smart contract and withdrawals of money, to create a bank this way quickly and easily, then we will have a function of deposit in the smart contract and withdrawals of money. Simple. Then we will have a deposit function and a withdraw function. We will make calls in this data field, as always signing our private key, and what we will do is pass the appropriate parameters. That will be validated by the nodes, and it will be registered. This is a type of transaction that you don't see a lot, but in the end what you have is who it's done from and what it's done against. It's a source transaction from one direction. In this case, it was the one that stole FTX, if it wasn't the people that were in there and interacted with a smart contract. In this case, it was MakerDAO. What it did was it did a function, which we see the detail here, the 4 bytes, in that decimal, which is approve. It's going to approve that somebody is able to this smart contract to move money on your behalf, and it's going to approve to this address and an amount FFFFF, which is infinite. It's a normal transaction. If we want to see the smart contract of the code, it's optional to verify it or not. Within, for example, DoScan, we go here to contracts. If you have the green tick here, it means that it has been verified, and here would be the source code, which would be immutable in principle. Then I'm going to show you some details and what is DeFi. I have tried to put those of you who have not done any of these transactions at the point where the others are more or less. DeFi would be the ability to interact with n smart contracts, even in the same transaction. This user could come in and have a smart contract deployed that would make a call. As a multiple of these, make a loan of his digital assets for which he's going to receive a return. This profitability will be received in any case, but by giving the loan, he will have already been granted immediately, at that very moment, the possibility of requesting a loan against this collateral. He could make a draft against that collateral. Normally, the price of this guarantee will be given to you by a price oracle, which is based on this, depending on the asset that you have. It has a price at that moment, at that instant. If this price changes, it must be possible to know what that price is. Very well, the erasure that you make, in this case the loan that you ask for in exchange, you could in turn deposit it in another different protocol completely, and as I say, all as part of the same transaction, to obtain other rewards and also obtain another interest. This is a leverage operation, which is the possibility of taking out with respect to an amount that you have to risk, because you are going to take out a higher amount. But here there is a problem in decentralized finance, and it is if the value of the asset prices that you are depositing starts to change. Depositing it, lending it, is called collateral. You will leave an asset here. Imagine that you have a house, and that house is worth, well, 10 million. That house gives you permission in a bank. You are authorized in the bank for a loan. But if the house were to go down in price and remain at a value of 1 million, the bank would try not to lose money, so there is the possibility of having liquidations. The liquidations normally, before you realize it, they have already done it to you. If your value in your deposit has lost value, if it has lost value, because you're going to see there are a lot of bots that are called maximal extractable value, that are MEV bots, that are going to do arbitrage. They're going to be on the hook to see if there's any kind of a chance of them paying off your debt, because you're losing your collateral is losing value, and they're going to do that because they're going to get some pretty steep discounts, and in the end, these are attacks. In the end, you see it as an attack because you are the one who has lost value, and before you added more liquidity or managed your operation, someone has come along and taken part of your cake. But this is in the protocol's interest because they don't want to be insolvent. If someone comes in and adjusts the equation and the protocol doesn't lose money, well, they stop being insolvent. So this is really sometimes understood as an attack and sometimes understood as really an arbitration management. At this point, what is fairer for you? Why do I continue to work in this sector? Because it has happened to me personally that the conditions I had agreed to have, the conditions that I had agreed, for example, in this case, in a bank, and I am not against banks, far from it, but I had an account without a salary, and suddenly, unilaterally, they have set up an account with a salary and started charging me commissions. When I stopped having to close the company, I stopped being paid. Well, suddenly they started charging me commissions. If the code is law and is immutable, the conditions are clear. They could not do that to me. On the other hand, I deposit my money, and they are charging me commissions for depositing my money, and possibly they are lending my money, and they are obtaining returns on my money, and they are charging me commissions. In any case, with blockchain, I can deposit it optionally because I can have it in cold wallets. And in any case, if I deposit it by making a DeFi operation in lending, etc., I am the one who gets the return on my money. In turn, I have the ownership because I have the private key, but if I deposit it in a place, I can have a password, whatever. But, as has happened in FTX, I can have double factor, I can have whatever, but the private key, that private key, always ask yourselves, if you have the private key, and if you do not know it, you do not have it. In this case, the exchange on duty has it. And then decentralization, in the end, for me being like some protocols that are starting to be carbon neutral, helping, in this case, global warming, because there are many infrastructures, in this case of large infrastructures, of banks, etc., which I am not against any of them, but in the end, they all have to have their own infrastructure, and many times, in the end, it is where they have 100% control and have to pay for it. Therefore, they charge us commissions. In this case, we all share the network, in addition to transparency and availability that is accessible to anyone. And if I'm also telling you, as you can see, the common thread, the objective of why this is attracting many people, many developers, investors, and liquidity. What if any user could open an account in seconds, anywhere in the world, without passing that risk analysis? Well, the banks themselves and Stanford Social Innovation and Cointelegraph, they tell us the number. There are 2 billion people who do not have the possibility, as of today, to open an account, and this technology is making it possible. And what is the projection? Well, in 2030, for example, PricewaterhouseCoopers comments. Now we will see that at the moment we are at some $48 trillion, which may seem a lot to you, but it is very little. It is nothing. It is what is being played with at the moment compared to the capital and liquidity that exists in other markets. But it is already estimated that in 2030, if today there are 48 trillion, it is estimated that in 2030, for example, England will have almost double what there is today in total at a global level. Therefore, the impact is expected to be higher. Hence, of course, venture capital and liquidity will come in. And talent is moving. They are paying different salaries. If you remember, in a talk at Rooted, the keynote, in 2019, I talked about how cybersecurity depends on the sector in which you apply it. If in this case you put it together with artificial intelligence topics, or you put it together, in this case, with blockchain, well, the demand for professionals is changing quite a bit. There are different salary ranges that are now going down from the boom of 2021. But for example, the more engineering part is going up, and quite a lot. It is paying a lot more because there are not many people who know these types of programming languages, etc. Will we really be able to absorb a massive adoption of this? Surely, as of today, well, some of you don't know that there are already, well, Alchemy says 12,000. There are many, many more. 12,000 applications, and it's growing. It is growing by the order of magnitude. In 2022, it has been 36% of all the smart contracts that have been deployed and verified on chain. It's been 36% of the total, just in 2022. Level 2 networks, which are the ones that are trying to help with scalability, to be able to get to this mass adoption, are growing on the order of 335%, 1,000%, 516%. And these are just 3 networks out of the multiple tier 2 networks that are out there that will allow Ethereum to scale. In terms of transactions per second, which would be something that would allow scaling and therefore receiving all these people at a massive level that are supposed to arrive, there is some data that I have taken from Ledger and Cointelegraph that speak that, well, the comparison at the Visa level, for example, Visa at this moment seems to be able to carry out a series of 24,000 transactions per second, and they have a project to manage in the order of 65,000 transactions per second. You can see the strong limitation that there is at the moment in the blockchain, and that is going to change quite a lot. In fact, Polygon is going to release now, on March 27th, the IBM Zero Nobles, and it is going to improve. Now we will see the trilemma that exists, but in any case, it would be in the order of 7,000 transactions per second, Solon in 4,500, and so on. So, well, they are a little bit on a par, although it is true that there are multiple blockchains. What is the main problem now? The trilemma that is called in this case in blockchain. It is called trilemma because, let's say, what all protocols try to address is to have a strong coverage of these 3 concepts, which would be decentralization, security, and scalability. Why? Let me give you an example. If we were to increase the block size to reach this massive adoption of people, then what we would have would be a penalty in decentralization, because we would have to have a giant machine, storage, hard disk, whatever, and to be able to synchronize all that, well, in the end, they would be large companies. So it would no longer be decentralized. Decentralized is that any of us, in fact, it is encouraged that any of us can have a node in our house with little technical capacity. And is it more secure than Web 2? Well, par rest in par rest. John McAfee, the first sentence he said, in the most insecure piece of software I've ever seen in my life, and we had to rewrite everything. So with that, I'm already giving you a hint that really the security issue by using blockchain, a lot of people use blockchain and then make a root pool that has a privileged administrator role for the whole withdrawal. People don't understand the code or they don't see the code, but if you in the code see that you can make a withdrawal and an administrator privileged wallet, well, really anybody can move that money. It is not because you use blockchain. Blockchain does not give you security. Blockchain allows you to do it in a secure way. What security problems do we have? Well, of course we inherited a lot from the internet.
Right?
In fact, there are a lot of hacks that use compromised private keys, etc. But then we have many others. Because, for example, at the level of the Ethereum virtual machine, we also have manipulation attacks on the main pool, which are all the transactions that are sent and are waiting to be executed. That is where the bots can enter and be able to make an attack in that sense. The smart contracts themselves, which we will now see several of the attacks, have re-entry attacks, programming with overflows, underflows and so on, and then the DeFi protocols themselves. Right now there is an attack that is based on flash loan. I don't know if you know what the flash loan concept is, but flash loan in 30 seconds is a concept that allows anyone to have the most firepower possible at that moment. And the firepower is in money, in digital assets, on condition that you return it in the same block, in the same transaction. You can ask for $500 million, use it to modify the value of any price oracle, modify it, take advantage of it, abuse the modification you have made, and then return the 500 million and keep the net return of what you have done. Well, as I was saying, liquidity is still very low, although there are 48 billion. In other words, this is a reality. I hear a lot of people saying this is just for cyber criminals, etc. There is nothing here. Well, if you see, there's almost 100% direct correlation between the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq with the value of the crypto themselves. So the investment is usually pretty institutional. And the 48 billion HACs, well, the hacks are in the order of 3.65 billion, depending if you add up 2 years or a single year. In any case, the growth is 41 to 2022. There is a lot of growth, but there is also a lot of growth in attacks. These attacks are of all types. There is cross-chain bridge, which are these two levels that I showed you before. So, of course, you attack one and you attack the whole protocol. So with a few attacks, you can have a lot of money. And then attacks on DeFi and attacks on exchange and so on. Well, I'm going to speed up a little bit. So we inherit vulnerabilities from Web 2, but we also have the new ones from Web 3. Okay, so I'm going to switch blocks. We are going to start talking about vulnerabilities and we are going to exploit them. I'm going to give you examples of real protocols and what the main problems have been. There is one main attack which you have to know about, which is the re-entry attack. It's an attack that's been around for quite some time, but unfortunately it's still being exploited in the jungle, which is what I say. These are recursive call attacks. During an execution of that transaction that I was explaining to you before, from DeFi, for example, you make a loan and based on that collateral, you ask for a loan. Well, when you ask for a loan, you get digital assets, whether they are tokens, which we will now see, RC, SynRes, BN, FBI, or if they come Ether, as it is configured in the Ethereum virtual machine, it allows you to make a fallback or a callback. It allows you, when you are making that initial transaction and you tell it to send a loan to your smart contract, because you create a malicious smart contract, you can create a function within that malicious smart contract, which is a fallback or a receive, and there you can put business logic. So you can capture the execution flow and do something like, since you are doing a borrow, do another borrow. So you nest borrow one inside the other. So if you were entitled to ask for a 10 Ether erasure, because you've deposited 15, you're going to get 20. Because you do a 10, and then you're going to do another 10. And the problem is that you do all that normally until the balance of that smart contract goes to 0. How can you solve it? Well, there are several ways. One is to use software design patterns, which is called the checkFX interaction pattern, which is, I check first if you have. In this case, you are authorized to ask for a deletion of any Ether. Then I will set the balance to 0. or I will update the variable so that you will not be allowed to enter again, or the next time you enter again, I will say, you no longer have the check. I will tell you, you no longer have the balance, and then I will send you any money. Example, this is wrong here. This is a vulnerability like a piano, because what we're doing is we're sending you a send. I'm going to withdraw money, and I'm going to send money. I want to withdraw it, I send it, and then I update my balance. So I will capture this call, a smart contract will go away, I will be able to do this as many times as I want, indefinitely, until I completely zero the balance of that smart contract. The way to do it is to do the checkFX interaction. Yo hago el efecto, le digo, vale, pues ya te queda cero y te mando el dinero. ¿Por qué? Porque la reentrada siempre la vas a poder hacer, el callback siempre lo vas a poder hacer. Cuando venga el callback de vuelta y haga un withdraw, aquí vas a ver que el shares del que está mandando, en este caso la llamada, va a ser cero. Con lo cual, si es cero, vas a mandar cero, no vas a poder mandar nada más.
Well, there is
Hay
another
otra
solution.
solución, y es utilizar un mutex, que es, le llaman, ha creado una librería OpenZeppelin. OpenZeppelin es una de las mejores empresas de seguridad en esto y está creando un conjunto de librerías muy importantes y se llama Reentrancy Guard. It's the Reentrancy Guard. In the end, what it does is as simple as saying, if the withdrawal has already entered once, you add a non-reentrant here as a modifier, and the first time it enters, it says it's already entered, and the next time it re-enters, it requires you not to have entered. So it crashes and does a revert of the transaction. Well,
We have two types of re-entry. I'm going to show the first one. Attack of $18 million stolen from Cream Finance. Cream Finance created a protocol that used, in this case, RC7777, which between us, what it allows is that you can do a fallback, a callback, when you receive those types of tokens. In this case, they were AMP tokens. So, it had a security audit. This Cream Finance protocol was not insecure, but by registering a token within the whole list of tokens that this protocol has, and that token had an RC7777, it was going to allow that when someone borrowed that token, a reentry could be made. If we analyze the transaction, we see that there is a borrow. Se hace el transfer del borrow que tú has hecho, y anidado hay otro borrow dentro del borrow initial.
Con lo cual, tú estás pidiendo un préstamo dentro de un préstamo en el que tú ya estabas autorizado. Con lo cual, vas a poder entrar las veces que sea. We are going to do the exploiting lab. I'm going to try to do all these labs quickly.
I'm going to I'm going to run it, and now I'll show you the okay. What we're going to do is we're going to do a normal borrow, and then we're going to do another borrow of this token. And this token is going to allow us to nest borrows inside. So let's see. RC7777 has this function that is token received. So I'm going to be able to execute code when that token is received. And what I'm doing is I'm putting this, I'm getting another borrow. Keep this because it's more complicated. I'm going to try to simplify it for you. When I ask for a borrow, it's going to get to execute this function, and if there's something there, it's going to execute it as well. And then, what am I going to do? Another borrow inside that initial borrow. So if, in theory, I was going to receive, well, imagine here, 10, well, I have received 355. Because I have been doing it non-stop. Let's look at the other example. The problem here is that when a protocol has this vulnerability, automatically hours go by, and the rest that use the same code have already been exploited because there is a lot of open source and a lot of fork. And in this case, if it was 18 million to Green Finance, it was another 11 million to AGB, Lending and Handler Finance for using exactly the same bug. Then we have another kind of re-entry, okay? it's not the RC7777. We have another re-entry, which is a fallback, it's called. And in this case, this company had paid $2 million to a bug hunter for discovering a re-entry problem for them, and they fixed it, but they had another re-entry problem. The re-entry problem they had was that when an attacker, for example, asked for the flash loan, remember what I told you, a flash loan is that you ask for all the firepower on the condition that you pay it back. So he asked for $150 million, and then he paid it back. But in the process of asking for that $150 million, he put it down as collateral. And so imagine if you deposit $150 million, let's see the collateral that you are going to be given. You are going to be given a pretty high collateral, right? You execute an erasure so that they give you a loan with that collateral, and when that collateral is transferred, the money that is the collateral, the erasure that you have requested, the loan that you have requested, in this case the ethers are transferred to you, 1977 ethers, but then you ask for it to reach your smart contract, and there you can capture it again by a callback, and you can put whatever, right? So you couldn't do a deletion inside another deletion because they had already capped that. But the exit market, which was in a different smart contract, and it's the one that gets you the endorsement, because this was not patched, because it was $80 million. In this case, what the attacker did, as you can see, was to receive this erasure, but the $150 million that he had deposited as collateral, he took it out and kept the loan, but he kept the collateral again, so he already had much more and did the same thing again, didn't he? And so on, with different protocols. To make matters worse, this uraniality suddenly appeared because they had it solved. Because another of the mitigations for this type of re-entry is when you have, well, I am going to go a little faster, when you have limited gas, right? And here, well, they messed it up and they did it again, right? So notice that here there is, in this case, the transfer of the ethers. He asked for 475 ethers, and when the 475 ethers arrived, an exit market was executed. I am going to execute it, and I'm going to show you exactly where the crux of the matter is. I'm going to go a little bit faster because I don't have time, okay? So the callback function is this, receive. When I receive money, what am I going to do? I'm going to execute something. So the smart contract malicious had this. When I receive the money, this automatically executes, so you would remove the collateral, right? Whereupon the attacker gets the endorsement. What I am doing it with a framework that is Foundry, which is very good, which is like the Swiss Army knife of Ethereum. I recommend it, and well, here are several colleagues, and creating open source a set of exploits, okay? And we're actually doing it in real. I'm doing a fork of the main blockchain network on block X, and I'm doing the exact same attack. Okay, I'm going to skip, okay? Then, well, for example, if when you steal in a multi-signature, if the multi-signature doesn't use cold wallet, but it's a private key, and they steal it from you by social engineering, which is what happened in the Harmony Horizon protocol, well, in this case, what you had to do was a double signature, like if it's 6, okay? In this case, Axie Infinity had $620-something million stolen, and it was because they stole 6 private keys, but they stole it. As long as there are private keys that are in software, they can be stolen. In this case, Harmony Horizon, well, they stole $100 million. And this attack, well, it's very simple because what it does is it simply makes a signature request for a smart contract, which is a wallet. And what it does is you need 2 signatures out of 5. If you are a team of 5 people, well, you need 2 signatures. If you steal from 2 people, that's it. There are very important social engineering attacks. For example, in the case of Axie Infinity, what they did was to invent a completely fake recruitment company attributed to Lazarus, so that what they wanted was simply for someone to click on a PDF and steal the private keys by infecting them. And they succeeded, but they had to set up the whole movie with actors and everything so that finally, after the interview, they made the offer, and the PDF was the malicious one. I'm going to go to, there's not much time left, okay? I'm going to go to one more. I'm going to go to one that's phone on Poly Network, $611 million robbery. This one has two problems. One, there are two smart contracts.
Right, so
between them, in theory, there should be no calls between them. But what the hacker here discovered is that if you made a call from one smart contract to another, that is, you passed as a parameter that the destination address to call was that other smart contract. For all intents and purposes, the call was going to be a privileged call because one was the owner of the other smart contract. First problem. Second problem. Remember at the beginning of everything I told you that the functions here in blockchain use the first 4 bytes of the hash of the function? Well, those first 4 bytes, normally it's very difficult to have a collision in a 32-byte hash, but indeed there can be a collision in a 4-byte hash. Okay? So what happened here? Here what they did was, by brute force, they identified a function that could be exactly the same hash, so that when there is a call from one smart contract to another, it keeps the first 4 bytes. So they came up with a function that was f, I don't know what, I don't know how many, and as parameters, bytes, uint 64, and it matches the hash with
attack,
put, call, epoch, call, put, call, such, which is to register you a keeper, which is a privileged address. So they mixed these two hacks. They mixed an assumption that there was never going to be a call between one smart contract and another. And then what they did was, by brute force, they came up with a function that by passing it as a parameter would match the hash. Notice that it's a little bit more sophisticated, and it was $611 million.
While I run it,
what makes you curious, as I'm a little bit short of time, so we see the source code or whatever there. What we have done has been, before the keeper had this address, and what we have done has been to register ourselves as keeper, therefore to be the ones that we could make the privileged call. And after making the privileged call, we put the function classing, and we say that the method that is executed is a method that coincides with the original one. We are going to go to the last part already. I have 8 minutes left. Well, here, just to close, one of the goals was for you to understand why the big attackers are behind or are being attracted to this technology. It's because for a single hack, they can extract super significant amounts. Why are bug hunters interested in this? Well, just last year alone, 2 hackers got NFTs as a gift or reward, plus in this case, $10 million that Satya 0x got for a vulnerability, which is the one that I'm going to show now. And then Pau Nainez is a well-known Web 2 hacker, and he made the jump to Web 3. And since he was very good at supporting vulnerabilities, well, in a matter of days, he got a $6 million, $1 million, $1 million, and $1 million. 1 million and another 1 million. He has 8 million. That's not all. If you go to Immunify's Hall of Fame, which is the quintessential bug hunting platform, the first one has 13 million, the second one has 10 million, and look at the fact that it has only been for 4.
In this case, or 2 reports.
In this case, it was 10 million for Satya 0x, and for that, I will have to tell you a little bit about what proxies are in this case in blockchain. In theory, everything is immutable. I told you in principle, in theory, it is immutable. But what if we wanted to change the code, patch something, a vulnerability, something that in theory is immutable? Well, we should try to keep the address and the storage of the state of that smart contract. How is it? Well, this can be done with what are called proxies and proxy calls. If you are a user and you make a call to a smart contract, and that smart contract, as it is programmed, makes a call to another smart contract, and it is a normal call, then, for example, the message sender, the one that sends the call, will be identified as the user. But here it will already be contract A because it is a new standard call, and the one making the second call is contract A, even though it is all part of the same transaction. The value that is sent, Ether or whatever, would be, here it would be, in any case, that of the user, and here it would be the one sent by the contract. With the delegated calls, what we can achieve is to keep all the state of all the variables as the end user who makes this call, and that is called delegated calls. You can have a smart contract that calls another one, but if the call is a delegated call, what it does is to execute the code that is here, but with the context of the proxy. The context is all the variables, all the state, and so on. So, for example, if we wanted, in this case, to execute the function foo, what we do is a call here to the function foo, but this is a proxy that derives a delegated call to its turn implementation, executes the function foo, but it does it with the context of the storage of this. This would be called a proxy, and this would be called an implementation. That's fine. You create new implementations because you have to keep updating your code, and what you do is point from the proxy to the next implementation. What happened here? What we have here are different types of proxy patterns. Here we are innovating, we are just starting, so there are, for example, in this case, the proxy that OneHole used, which was the one that gave them this 10 million reward, used the UPS, which is the Universal Upgradable Proxy Standard, where the business logic of upgrading from one implementation to another was in the implementation itself. Instead, if what is called the transparent proxy pattern, which is the upgrading code, is in the proxy, not in the implementation. In the implementation, you have another set of functions, such as the foo function, etc. What happens? That there are different pros and cons to having this. Here, for example, the code is bigger than here. Here it's fairly lightweight code. Here the way to do it is to identify whether it's the admin or it's not the admin making the call and such. So, well, in the end, that's all code. In this case, it seemed like it was a fairly straightforward way to execute this. What happened here? Well, here, in fact, you didn't have to think too much because already in the year of 2021, a vulnerability was detected, which is what I'm going to tell now. And the problem is that this was in the year 2022. Several months went by and this company had this problem. The problem is that if you have the implementation, which is another smart contract, and when you initialize it, because when you have an implementation and a proxy, you can also have a constructor, which is what is executed as soon as you start. But what happened is that you initialize the implementation. If you initialize it directly, you are in the context of that implementation. And then here you have the possibility to authorize an upgrade if you are the owner. But if you make this call, that is, you make the initialization from the proxy, but you forget to initialize it also directly from the implementation, someone can become owner of the implementation and can execute an upgrade of the implementation. Explain the example. What we would have is a proxy, its implementation, which is how the OneHole project was, and what the hacker did, the white hacker, was to say, well, I'm going to initialize, of course, all of this in a fork, like I've done here today. I'm going to do it here. I'm going to initialize the implementation, I'm going to own the implementation, and I'm going to send an upgrade to the implementation, because normally the upgrade, the code would be in the transparent proxy, but if it's a UOps, the upgrade code is there in the implementation itself. And I'm going to throw a malicious smart contra, which is the one over there on the right-hand side. And what I'm going to say is, I'm now your owner in the implementation, and I'm going to pretend that you're the proxy. I'm going to tell you to upgrade and point to the implementation over there. But I'm going to make a delegated call to you, so I'm going to be in the context of the implementation, which is you, with which, if in the source code of the new malicious implementation, it executes an operation that is called self-destruct. It is executed in the context, which is to destroy the smart contract. The self-destruct is executed, but it is executed in the context of the implementation. That is to say, I destroy that implementation. If you have a proxy whose implementation incorporates, and it is the only place where it incorporates the possibility of making upgrades, and you load it, that proxy becomes completely unusable. The proof concept that we have is we create a malicious smart contract. That malicious smart contract has a self-destruct inside. What we do is we're going to check that, first of all, the implementation has a size. It has something, it's a code, it's a bytecode that has something, which is the implementation of one hole. What we're going to do is we're going to prepare the update process, and then we're going to look at what is, in this case, the size that the implementation has. The size that the implementation has, this one, and it's 0x. I've completely loaded it. If I load this, and here I have $736 million, which was what this project had, then that project would disappear. Those assets would be irrecoverable, which is what happened here. Objectives achieved. What were those seconds? Well, I don't know. You will tell me now with the questions, but in principle, well, I have tried to make you understand why it is attracting great professionals, why it is attracting the best or most dangerous attackers, and why it is attracting the divers, which finally is because of the incentives that we all have, which is economic. And we have this phrase, which is that the earth has music for those who listen, and nothing more questions.
We have 3 minutes for questions. If we go to the break, raise your hand. Remember, those of you who have arrived late, we give out radios, okay? If the question is interesting and the speaker wants to, okay? Don't do it on the radio. I mean, just because.
Yes, I wanted to ask, the blockchains that use, instead of Solidity, a functional language like Cardano that Plutus uses, do you think that would be quite a bit more secure and less susceptible to exploitation?
I don't think so. I think that in the end, the main problem that this technology has, whatever language it is that in the end, the people who are developing, normally all the people, all the developers, have never always had that knowledge of secure coding, and unfortunately, they are not having it now. I am seeing every day job offers, making more than $100,000, etc. Being a Solidity programmer from 0 to 100, that person is hardly going to be. It is true that the Cardano network is created by one of the creators initially also of Ethereum, and that it has enough know-how and that they are doing well. But in the end, usually the networks are staying at the level of creating. That is, instead of creating the whole ecosystem, that is, or to create the whole ecosystem are many points. We have seen before, for example, in the DeFi framework, that you have virtual machines, then you have smart contracts, then you have. So I think the issue is simply that if there is more or less interest on the part of the attackers because there is more or less liquidity, they will go there. That is, they will attack where, well, we will see. Now there is also a launching of ZK EWMs, and well, we will see. But I would say no. I would say no. From what I'm seeing, usually the developers you're seeing now are trying to pick up however they can, and the skills are usually not the best, which is normal, logical, and on the other hand, because it's new.
One question while you're picking up Mark. For people who want to dedicate themselves to this, what training is there? Because it is true that I receive, for example, job offers of dollars of developer with 1 or 2 years of experience. What would you recommend in case someone wants to change jobs?
Well, there are now also offers of training programs. There are master's degrees being launched by different people, especially in development. I, for example, launched one as a proof of concept of security, but there are starting to be more offers. For example, there is one that I particularly like. The thing is that it is from SANS, which is carried out with a very good company, the people from Harvard. And the thing is that, well, it is also a bit expensive and so on, but in the end, what we are seeing is that there will be more and more. I mean, I was in contact with people from EC Council who also seem to want to do something. I mean, I think that right now is the moment, but as I say, if you are going to be developers, because it is true that the incentives are very high, because the salaries are several orders of magnitude, worry a little bit about security because you can see that in a single transaction, everything can go to the network.
The last one, and we go
yes,
to
a little question down here. Very good talk. At the book bounty level, looking a little bit at the prices, the rewards that you are paying, I understand that first with one of those you retire. That is to say, you get a bug. Do you know of other book bounties for technologies that pay more money than what is being paid now for discovering bugs in all this?
Right now, I don't know of anything that pays more than here. In fact, I guess you know Saurek, well, the one from Cydia, from Jailbreak and such. Well, Saurek had 2 million on Optimism on one of the two networks, and that's what he did. He brought it to Pointingf's attention to say, fuck, Saurek has made 2 million here, and he made 6 million on the Aurora network. It's spectacular. And every day new ones are coming out. It's spectacular. So I think a lot of people only know about Web3 and so on, but it's a good opportunity for all of us who come every year to work on this. It changes a little bit, I mean, because we inherited, but there are many people who do not know how to report vulnerabilities in web issues because there are also web applications in the burgundies and so on. I don't understand. Smart control is what is being paid the most, but come on, I am completely dumbfounded at how much is being paid.
10 fucking kilos seems to me a savagery, yes.
And it is a vulnerability that, as you have seen, we can go into the detail of the code and all that, but it is not either. In fact, in September of the previous year, Penn Zeppelin itself became aware of that vulnerability and tried to patch all the smart contracts it saw. But when you are doing an upgrade and you launch a new implementation, because I have shown you the proxies that can bring out new implementations, well, in that one, you forget it. Do you know how they fixed it? They paid 10 kilos and sent a transaction setting all the fields to 0. That's it. That was the solution. They initialized it. That's it. 10 kilos. In other words, it's brutal. Poninef's is more sophisticated and they only gave him 6. But yes, exaggerated.
Rest. How can you tell you're Catalan when you talk? That's enough, eh, fucker? Come on, the last one, and we go to the breakdown there. And again, following Raúl tastes a lot. The pity is that we didn't have much time, but if you need anything, contact him. He'll solve your life.
Hello, I have a doubt. I do not know if in this area can happen a little as happens perhaps with patches, for example, those we see of operating systems, Androids, Windows, and so on, that as the patch appears is already studying what is solving that patch to attack precisely the systems that are not yet patched. Here it could happen that as perhaps some smart contract is patched, it is already being exploited to attack other similar ones or that are forks of that first one.
It has already happened. Not so much in smart contracts, but in the validator nodes themselves, because you have to deploy a new version and all nodes are updated. So there's a silent patch policy to get them out. Not to say very well the need, but when that's urgent and such, then it's happened to the Polygon network. A vulnerability was reported. They paid, I think it was 2 million to Bug Hunter, and it was a vulnerability. Well, it wasn't very complex. That is, in the end, they reinvented the wheel a little bit. They are super good people, but in the end, the recovery of a digital signature, whatever. Well, the thing is that if you sent a digital signature different from 65 bytes in size, because you know that it has 32 bytes, the RSV of the digital signature, it returned a 0 address, and that 0 address then made a transfer and sent the money. That is, they could have taken out the, at that time there were about 9 billion, I do not know, exaggerated, that is, because it is valued, capitalized at 10 billion, I do not know if it was 9 billion, something like that. So what they did was, it was December 4th of the year 2021, and they patched the whole thing on day 5. I mean, they managed to patch it first on Mumbai network, which is their test network, but when they released the silent patch and they patched it first on the test network, there's everybody watching, and then what happened was very curious, because then there was another bug hunter that reported the same vulnerability, and that one they patched on the test network. They still gave him 500,000 Matic tokens, which are those of his own network, but then there was an exploitation of 800,000 Matic, which in exchange, well, they were like another million, and some dollars, $2 million. I do not know why they did not get everything, Maybe they do not know who it was, but they did exploit it, and then they finish it patching on day 5 at 8 o'clock in the afternoon. Everything points to the fact that the silent patch process is not so silent, because at the end people say, wow, how strange that they are patching all of a sudden. Then people do reverse and look a little bit at what it is, and they stole only 800,000, they paid 2 million to one person and another million to another person, but they managed to save the 10 billion.
Well, we'll leave it here. Did you like any of them? Any specific questions? We gave you a radio, 1, 2, or 3. Or none? And then they hit you? Come on, what is it? Okay. Well, thank you. Break at 12 o'clock or 12. Yes, Mark's coming. Come on, please. And we'll carry on, okay?